So good afternoon. We're joined here by Tiddo, who's the chairman, the president, I think, of FIVA. So would you like just to explain briefly what the objectives of FIVA are?
Yeah, very briefly, FIVA is about keeping historic vehicles on the road, in motion. I think that's what it's about. So what we see here, of course, is perfect. I must say we're not so much for racing, we are more for the use of historic vehicles on public roads, but the attraction of this is all that so many people come here by historic vehicles. So it's a good reason to keep your historic vehicle movement, this wonderful event.
Yeah, so obviously this is an elite event, but as you said, FIVA is behind more general usage and trying to encourage everyone to make use and preserve classic vehicles.
Yeah, that's correct. And also it's important to know that we're not only for cars, it's also about motorcycles, mopeds, buses, trucks, even tractors. So recently we have been on a very interesting, important event just for agricultural. I think that's also part of the people that have just a passion for historic vehicles, whatever historic vehicle it is.
And what are your objectives specifically here at the revival?
Well, for me it's the first time to be here, so in that respect it's also a great experience, of course, to learn what it is about, and I'm really very surprised and very impressed by what I see. I think the most interesting for me is that it's kind of a big theater here, because actually everybody seems to be an actor here, not only the drivers, but everybody around here. About 95% of people is dressed up here, and that's really something unique, I think.
Yeah, I would agree with you on the 95%. It's a very high compliance rate, isn't it? And one thing we've been talking about is that, I mean, there are some young people here, of course, but generally speaking, it's an age-related thing, and older people are more interested in cars. The younger generation maybe less so. Is FIVA doing anything to try to inspire and encourage the younger generation?
Yeah, of course, that you address a very important subject. It's not an easy subject, but I must say I see quite some young people around here as well. Interesting thing, I think, is that also young people are interested by the old designs, maybe not so much by the old technique, but the different forms. They're so different from the more, let's say, uniform designs of current cars that I think there's a real interest, and there's an enormous potential, I think, that we can develop altogether.
Yes, and in terms of the actual technical side of it, does FIVA get involved in the actual technical, in terms of the restoration and preservation of cars?
Well, it's not core business to be involved directly in that part of the movement. But for instance, we have a Torino charter, which is kind of guidance rules for how to restore a vehicle, what kind of things you have to take account of, how to look after authenticity, to document what you do and that kind of stuff. So in that respect, we have a kind of general guidance also about restoration.
And would you say that the classic car scene and preservation, would you say it's in good health at the moment, or have you concerns about people maybe getting older, at the point that I made a few minutes ago?
Yeah, that's really, of course, also a concern that we hear a lot from the businesses. It's maybe different in different countries. Of course, in a country like India, where there's a lot of restoration business now developing, of course there are more young people, because that's the demography of that country. But I hear a lot from businesses here in Europe, UK, Netherlands, where I come from, Germany, that they are looking indeed for people also with the right skills, because it's not so much about the interest, but how to learn people to get the right skills to do this all.
And what about the United States? I've been struck in my recent trips to the United States of what our generation would call American cars. You know, your big Chevrolet and your Cadillac don't exist anymore at all. Everybody's driving Hyundais and what have you. Well, how would you see the classic car movement in the States?
Well, it's quite big. I mean, we have also a very important partner in the United States, and they represent more than 500,000 people having an interest in historic vehicles. So I think there's a huge interest as well there, but the problem is they're not maybe so related with Europe. They do their own thing, and they still have this aspect of general freedom to drive, and they have less concerns maybe as well about what happens here. Of course, we think about all the challenges, things like shift to electric cars and that kind of issues. So I think they are a little bit less concerned about that in the United States, but I also see there a lot of future.
And finally, you touched on it about the electrification. What's your own personal view of doing things like taking an Aston Martin DB5 or whatever the car might be, putting an electric motor into it? How do you feel about that?
Well, in the first place, of course, it's the owner's right to do whatever he thinks is correct to do, apart when it's a real important cultural object which should be protected. But of course, from FIVA aspect, we do not really appreciate this development. We think that only vehicles with their original engine, of course, replacement engine, whatever, that they are the real stuff, and that's what we look after. But it's of course interesting development. We do not support it, but we have quite a strong view on that, and we just of course follow what happens there. I don't think that's something that is really a threat, because it's also very expensive to do. So actually this morning at breakfast we spoke with a guy from Holland who was doing this kind of electrification, and yeah, they say, for instance, for a Porsche 911 you pay something like 100,000 euros. I mean, it's not affordable for most people to do so. So I don't see this as a real threat.
No, well, we'll see how it develops over the next decade or so. Tiddo, thank you very much indeed for coming along and speaking to us.
It was a real pleasure to speak with you, and I hope we all have a lot of pleasure. And what we are for is to have this kind of events not only next year, but also in 10 and 20 years. So that's what we work for. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.